evening, everyone. My name is Erin Carlson-Mast, and I'm the Executive Director here at President Lincoln's Cottage. It's my pleasure to welcome you here to our first Cottage conversation of this season, featuring Richard Moe. Please silence your cell phones. We invite you to join us downstairs immediately following the Q&A for our book signing. What makes this program really stand apart from other book talks is our commitment to featuring new scholarship, coupled with the opportunity to hear about an author's works in the very rooms where Lincoln read. Lincoln read aloud to family and friends. He read silently and contemplatively to himself. He sought answers in prose and poetry to the questions presented by the tragedy around him. Our commitment to seek truth led to the creation of Cottage Conversations, our first and oldest public program, shortly after we opened in 2008. Despite its popularity and loyal following, programs like this one really cannot continue and thrive without considerable support. And we're very grateful for the generous support of Northern Trust Corporation. We have Dutch Miller here with us this evening. Thank you, Dutch. Mr. David Bruce Smith, who's also one of our trustees. David's here this evening as well. And F. James Tenney's, who, without their support, we wouldn't have been able to continue the Cottage Conversation program through the 2013-2014 season. So before I introduce Dick, I'd like to welcome Jim Tenney to the front to say a few words. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. Along with Erin, I'd like to welcome you to the first of the Cottage Conversation discussions for the 2013-2014 year. Before Erin's introduction of Richard, I would like to commend the Cottage to you for two purposes. One is what we're doing tonight, which is to visit, to be here, to spend time together. The other is a place to support. Earlier this year, Erin asked us, my son and I, if we could help the Cottage because funding was needed for the Cottage Conversations programs. And along with several others, as Erin said, we agreed to do that. And Erin asked me tonight to just say a couple of words about why did we do that. So why support the college? Why support the Cottage? There are many reasons. I think the three reasons in particular stand out. And this is why we did it. First, the Cottage is a place of stunning historical authenticity. There are few places where you can sit, walk, and reflect in the same place where a president of the United States lived and worked. And not just any president, but Abraham Lincoln. Look around at the walls, at the doorways, at the windows. Lincoln is here. Second reason, the Cottage's themes, the themes that are emphasized here are timeless and they're essential to us as people. What are those themes? Freedom. Freedom to use one's labor as one wants to. Liberty. Liberty to pursue the education and dreams of one's own choosing. The right not to have the majority take advantage of a minority. Justice, too. Justice is one of the themes here. As Lincoln said, must every drop of blood drawn with a lash be paid with another drawn with a sword? So justice is something that is an important topic here. Across these themes, also is the topic of national survival. Under horrendous strife, was this country going to survive or not? We've seen that just this month in Washington. So we see it again. Third reason to support the Cottage. In Lincoln's life, vital parts of which were lived here in these walls. Downstairs, up here, on the porch, outside. There's a transcendence to the themes that Lincoln gives to us. Lincoln's desire to serve other people. Lincoln's desire to keep the country together. Lincoln's personal desire, his great personal desire to outlaw slavery, even in the face of existing legal and political system that endorsed slavery and approved of slavery. Lincoln's life speaks to us and says, how should I live my life? How can I carry out the responsibilities that I have day to day in the best way possible, to the best of my ability? How can I accommodate a reality which is imperfect and yet strive for something better? How can I possibly do all of this while taking care of daily needs? As we walk around the cottage, we can see in our mind's eye Lincoln working out a solution. To Black Americans, you could join the dream. To the North, the Union will hold. And to the South, with malice towards none. In my mind's eye, I can see Lincoln walking up the staircase that we just ascended. Weary from another chaotic wartime day. I can see Lincoln downstairs meeting with soldiers, citizens, politicians. Patient as he was despite his workload. I can also see Lincoln sitting here in this room at the desk, trying to find a solution to North and South, black and white, war and peace. Exhausted, he must have often felt hopeless. Yet in this house, which he loved, he summoned the fortitude to, as he said, strive on to finish the work we are in. He did that while he was here. Here in this room, sitting behind a desk, Lincoln found a way to save the country, to end slavery, and remain popular in a fickle democracy. Here in this house, Lincoln met destiny. These walls do speak, and what a story they have to tell to us. So I urge you, each of you, give freely to the cottage to preserve Lincoln's sanctuary, this place of rest, and this source of inspiration and happiness for Abraham Lincoln. Your contribution allows the cottage to tell the amazing story of Lincoln, of freedom, and of national survival. This story can be told from this hilltop to every hilltop in America. So I urge you to support the cottage. Aaron, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate that. Tonight, we're pleased to welcome Richard Moe. And given the fact that Dick was the driving force behind the cottage restoration, and that this site would not have become a site of the National Trust without him, I doubt I need to say much to introduce him, but please do indulge me. Dick has had a distinguished career in government, law, and historic preservation. A native of Minnesota, he was educated at Williams College and the University of Minnesota Law School. At an early age, he was elected chairman of the Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party, before being asked to serve as Chief of Staff to Vice President Walter Mondale and as a senior advisor to President Jimmy Carter. After 12 years as a partner at the law firm of Davis, Polk & Wardwell, he served as president of the National Trust for Historic Preservation from 1993 until his retirement in 2010. His previous works include The Last Full Measure, The Life and Death of the First Minnesota Volunteers. He and his wife, Julia, divide their time between Washington, D.C. and Santa Fe, New Mexico, and we're also pleased to welcome his daughter, Alex, who's here with us tonight. Dick is here today to talk about his new book, Roosevelt's Second Act, The Election of 1940 and the Politics of War. It has been selected by Oxford University Press to be included in its Pivotal Moments in American History series. Now, of course, Cottage Conversations is typically focused on Lincoln, emancipation, and Civil War subjects. But given the incredible parallels between the Lincoln and Roosevelt presidencies, their decisions about war and peace and issues of social justice and more, and the undeniable truth that part of Lincoln's legacy is his impact on every president who followed him, when Dick suggested it might make for an interesting talk, we happily agreed. Please join me in welcoming Dick.
back here. This is a very special place, and always will be to me. Spent many years. But this was a construction site, and now it's become one of the great historic sites in America. And I just am filled with admiration for what Erin and her staff and her board members have done. This is a work in progress, but I think the kind of programming that you have, not just these kinds of events, but particularly the work downstairs that I saw in the exhibit, bringing attention to human trafficking and slavery in our time, using the Emancipation Proclamation as a lever to do that, I think is a brilliant use of this place to make it relevant today and not just a relic of the past. I have always believed that this is the single most important Lincoln site in the country. Now, I get into a lot of arguments when I go to Illinois. but I can hold my own on that, because this is the only place that represents his presidency, aside from the White House. And that is why we honor Lincoln, because of the presidency that he served. I've always been fascinated with Abraham Lincoln, as so many of you have. And I once thought that, and I love to write. I love to read history and I love to write. And I once thought, maybe I should write a Lincoln book. And I became so intimidated by the scholars that really know what they're talking about, that I quickly backed away from that. And I said, well, why don't I do something that I know how to do? Maybe restore this cottage. And so with Erin's help and that of a lot of you and others, this happened. And here we are, and so much better. I was not as intimidated by Franklin Roosevelt, and I don't know the answer why, but I wasn't. And I've always, Aaron mentioned I came out of a Minnesota political background, and Hubert Humphrey was my mentor, and he had been heavily influenced by Franklin Roosevelt, and therefore so was I, indirectly. He was everywhere we went back then. I've always been struck by the parallels between FDR and Lincoln. And while that is not the theme of this book, there's a constant thrust of those parallels, and Lincoln keeps coming up. One of the great things about speaking in this room is you don't have to worry about the PA system. You just have to speak loud. And that's what I'm trying to do. Those parallels keep coming up, and I interject them in this book. And in preparation for this evening, I made a special effort to go back and read those and to do some other research to draw the parallels between what I think are the two of the three great presidents in our history. It's clear that they had a lot in common. They both dominated the events of their own time. Lincoln in the 19th century, Roosevelt in the 20th century. They were both war presidents, no small thing. They both had to teach themselves how to be commander-in-chief, which is a very, very difficult thing. But neither one lived to see the successful conclusion of the war. They assured the successful conclusion of the war, but neither of them lived long enough to see the end of the war.